Yeah, very briefly, diolch yn fawr, Kiki. Just as a way of background, really, very briefly, we've been installing Wi-Fi's in towns the last 3 years in Anglesey and Gwynedd. And we started off in Aberdaron, and then we learned from that project, and then we installed devices in both towns, in both counties, as I say. And alongside that, we've also been developing the analytics side. So we have a system called Patrum, and the aim is that we kind of collect data, we understand data, and we can make informed decisions based on that data. And about 3 years ago, the CEO of Anglesey County Council, Dylan Williams, expressed a desire for the island to become smarter, especially in relation to destination management. And during COVID, for example, the island was extremely busy with thousands of people coming to Anglesey. Some areas very busy and some areas very quiet. And could we maybe collect some data on the movement of people and how that could inform decisions? So we have always, we've been familiar with smart cities for probably 10, 15 years, but that technology hasn't really been deployed in rural areas such as Anglesey. So why not have a smart island? So really that was the catalyst for this piece of work. Obviously aligns with the work we're doing across Wales, but we wanted to focus here on Anglesey and how we could use data to make better decisions. So that's why we commissioned this piece of work by Urban Foresight. And I'll hand over back to Kiki.
Diolch, Dafydd. So building on what Dafydd said, so I work on Smart Towns Wales project. So I work with communities across the country. And one of the barriers that we face is getting different groups of people working together, communicating, sharing the data and ideas. So this has just been a great opportunity to get people from all the different sectors on Anglesey working together towards like a common goal and towards helping the community. So I just wanted to thank everyone that's given their time for the interviews, who's come to the workshops, and a big thank you to Maddie and Elliot for all their work as well. So I'll hand over to you guys then, and we can hear about the project.
Perfect, thank you both. So I'm Maddie Thompson and this is Elliot Burns, and we work at Urban Foresight. Urban Foresight is based in the UK, in England and Scotland, although we do quite a lot of work in Wales, particularly with Menter Mon. And I've sort of worked with Menter Mon on the Smart Towns projects they've been doing as well. And effectively what we did sort of between November and December is we've engaged lots of different stakeholders around, on and around Anglesey. So this is from the council, from private businesses, from skills providers. And also we've done a bit of community engagement, so gone out and sort of spoke to people living and working on the island as well. And we've tried, as Kiki and Daphne were saying, I've tried to think about what a smart island strategy might look like for Anglesey, and very much kind of taken into account the very specific context that Anglesey has. So it is an island. Already this makes it different to other kind of rural and sort of remote smart strategies that might happen elsewhere. So today what we're going to talk to you about, just get my slides moving, is some of the key challenges that Anglesey has. So what are the key challenges and what are some of the opportunities? We'll then talk a little bit about the existing smart landscape in Wales and Anglesey. So the work of Menter Mon means that there is already a really sort of thriving smart landscape there, and there's lots to sort of build upon. And then we're going to talk about what our recommendations for kind of Anglesey's future should be. So how Anglesey can move into becoming this kind of smart island. And we'll go through the key sort of overarching view and vision of the strategy, as well as delve into some of the quite specific recommendations. And then at the end, I'm of course open for any questions and answers. And as Kiki was saying, if you can just put any questions that you might have as the presentation goes in the chat, we can come back to those at the end and have a bit of a discussion. So I'll pass over to Elliot for the start.
Yeah, so as Maddie's just said, the first thing that we're going to look at is the challenges and opportunities facing Anglesey in the context of developing the Smart Island strategy. So transition Anglesey to a smart island obviously is not a straightforward task, as you need to ensure smart solutions benefit the island's communities and natural environment, while addressing the challenges that are present as well. So a detailed strategy here includes an overarching vision, specific goals and aims, and a series of delivery objectives that have been developed to help Anglesey navigate this smart transition. So over the next few slides, we're going to explore a few of the key themes of this work and place the challenges and opportunities of Anglesey into context. So in light of that, as you'll see, sort of moving through these slides, we're going to be considering economy, tourism, energy, and digital as key supporting pillars for the community and environment on Anglesey and the development of the strategy. So the first key area of focus is obviously the community and the environment. So Anglesey has a low population density and an aging population. Over 50% of people are Welsh speaking. It also has a World Heritage Site in Mae'r Castle, and then areas of outstanding natural beauty that must be protected as well. So other issues involve conflict between locals and tourists, especially around honeypot sites, things relating to housing, traffic, and environment. And then other considerations include net zero commitments at a local and national level. So moving through to look at the economy. So on Anglesey, there's a large base of micro businesses. So these are businesses that have between 0 and 9 staff, and they make up 90% of total businesses on the island. It's also dominated by low skill, low wage work. For example, in tourism, 8% of residents are employed, and then also the industries such as retail. But there is also an emerging digital sector here as well. The islands face numerous setbacks to industrial activity, crucially the closure of the Rehab Plastics plant, which has actually recently, last few months, been bought by a Manchester-based company that's looking to refurbish this site to host office, workshop, and warehouse space. And then also we've got the suspension of Hitachi's plans to reopen the Wilfer nuclear plant also. More broadly, there are various opportunities for industrial activity from the free port through to energy generation and digital innovation. And then also there's a specific focus here on energy production and that energy generation potential of the island as well. So moving forward to look at transport. Anglesey has existing road, rail, ferry and cycling infrastructure alongside increasing investment in electric vehicle infrastructure. So for example, looking at the ferry port in Holyhead, this handled 5.9 metric tons of freight and 808,000 passengers in 2020. 82% of households on Anglesey own a car and van, and 3/4 of all journeys are by car or taxi. So journeys by public transport are decreasing, and there's a lack of resilience in terms of connection to the mainland that's been heightened during the recent bridge closure. And then key critique here is that the transport infrastructure of the island is set up to facilitate people leaving rather than oriented to retain them. Looking at energy. So Anglesey has the second highest average domestic energy use per household across Wales in 2020. And it's estimated that around 7,000 residents live in fuel poverty. So Anglesey ranks 17th amongst local authorities in Wales for energy production. And it's got great potential for solar, onshore wind, offshore wind and tidal production. As well as this, there are sort of numerous opportunities to exploit new technologies in marine, hydrogen or nuclear. So crucially, Menter Mon and Cora Energy have been investigating the feasibility of using hydrogen as a liquid carrier, which, if it was successful, would be a world first as well. And then linking back around to the smart side of things, looking at digital. In Anglesey, 95% of homes have decent internet, which is classified as being over 10 megabytes per second connection. And then only 20% of people have access to ultrafast, which, as you can see, there is over 300 megabytes. So there's ongoing projects on Anglesey to extend 4G and 5G coverage, improve broadband connectivity, and allow proper Wi-Fi points to be installed. However, things like the low population density and uneven terrain on the island make it costly to improve digital infrastructure. Projects that I believe Daff had already mentioned at the beginning include Patrum, which focuses on collecting data from public Wi-Fi and a series of Internet of Things sensors installed in devices and counters in town centres. So this has led to the development of a smart dashboard, which displays elements such as town centre visitor statistics, dwell time, demographics, weather, and more. So one of the key challenges in this area is digital exclusion. particularly in context of Anglesey having an aging population, large quantity of older adults, rural areas, and a lot of people for whom English is a second language. So there's an importance here to consider upskilling local community support in order to develop smart technologies and smart tech strategies that utilize digital tech so that they're effective. And, you know, again, looking at the bottom there, growing digital sector, but worries about lack of skills. So crucially addresses that point there. So in context of that, looking at the smart landscape in Wales and Anglesey, we're going to briefly summarise the overarching policy environment at a national, regional and local level, considering the implications that this might have for the development of the Smart Island strategy. So, as you can see here, Wales is currently undergoing a smart revolution. So there's a huge appetite from the Welsh Government, local authorities, cities, towns and communities to understand how smart tech can alleviate some of the pressures faced across the country. So you can see some key policies listed on the right there. So crucially, we've got favourable local and national policy environment for sustainable development and net zero initiatives, digital innovation, public and things like active travel. And there's opportunities to tie into strategic funding here, such as UKRI, Innovate UK, levelling up green bonds and things like that. And then other initiatives such as the Year of the Smart Towns has raised the profile of digital tech and smart technologies innovations in general. So moving to look more specifically at Anglesey, there's a series of existing smart projects happening in and around the island, which provides a useful starting point from which to build a smart island approach, some of which we've already gone over, including Patram and Year of the Smart Towns as well. And then, moving to look sort of more at smart overall and what this could mean. So smart places, they integrate technology with physical infrastructure and use data to address challenges, improving the delivery of services. Some potential benefits of doing this include places becoming more attractive to businesses and residents, attracting more investment and promoting economic growth. Also having a reduction of pollution through better understanding of traffic flows and things, and also boosting local businesses by monitoring spend patterns, reducing administrative costs through digitization. However, any attempt to create a smart place, as we've just said, must engage a wide range of stakeholders, focus on building strong foundations and supporting needs of all citizens, rather than just focusing on eye-catching technology deployment.
So in putting together a strategy for Anglesey's transition to a smart island, we've gone back to the conversations we've had with stakeholders, the workshop that we held in early December, but we've also looked at smart island policies elsewhere in the world. So there's a few more in the UK, in the Highlands and the Isles of Scilly. There's also lots kind of happening in European islands and also in places such as the Caribbean as well. So there is kind of a specific approach that islands need to take, recognising that they are sort of slightly more disconnected, particularly in terms of digital technologies. So it's often a lot more difficult to connect islands to the national grid, but also to ensure that there's kind of Wi-Fi and 4G. So we've taken a very, very specific approach here that really pulls in those kind of key challenges and opportunities that Elliot's gone through, but also thinks about that wider context of what's already happening in Wales and Anglesey. You don't necessarily need to do something entirely brand new. It's drawn on what's already there. And effectively, we've developed this strategy that we think can act as a bit of a roadmap to move forwards over the next few years. So it's important then that this has a kind of overarching vision and a kind of an overarching image and idea that people can get behind. And we think for this, as the key thing is that the smart transition needs to improve the island's connectivity. It's improving connections between businesses and other businesses and the local authorities and the people that would shop there. But it's strengthening digital connectivity. It's improving transport connections, again, on the island and from the island to the mainland. And it's connecting energy use and generation in a way that's a lot more efficient. We also think this really involves an Anglesey first approach. So in our engagement with the local community and stakeholders, there is a lot of expertise and knowledge and passion on the island. And it's not just making sure that the culture, heritage and natural environment is protected, but it's making sure that these can kind of go forwards and thrive. And we think sort of an Anglesey first approach is really, really key here. So these are the sort of two overarching things: to improve connections and to make sure that Anglesey is first. Within this, we've then broke down these kind of 4 key challenge areas to look at some specific goals for each one. So when it comes to the economy, we think Anglesey needs to focus on realising its goals of providing a competitive business landscape, skilled employment for its current residents, and the ability to attract external investment. This should be a key goal of any smart transition. When we look at transport, there is definitely need to improve its resilience and connectivity to the mainland, but also improve transport options on the island and move towards this kind of net zero goals in transport. When it comes to energy, Anglesey should strive to become a net energy generator or producer and a leader in renewable energy generation, whilst again maintaining these net zero goals. And then finally, in relation to digital, there is definitely a need for Anglesey to really draw on the power of data and digital technologies to effectively support what's happening in these other 3 areas. So to support data-driven and efficient decision-making, but also to really ensure that the community can access and benefit from this digital innovation. So by collecting more data, by understanding what's happening on the island, people that live and work there should be able to benefit from this. And we can already see this happening with Patron. So what does this look like in practice? We've kind of gone through, again, all the discussions that we've had, our existing knowledge on smart transitions for places. And we came up with a series of 74 potential solutions that could have been used to make Anglesey more smart. So this long list, not everything on there is necessarily that feasible. Some things were quite out there. So we've gone and looked at the feasibility of implementing things as well as their likely impact, and then also start thinking about the priority and kind of when things should be happening, realizing that not everything can happen at one point. From this and from, again, sort of discussions with Menter Mon, we've sort of highlighted 10 key priority recommendations that we think should be taken quite seriously and addressed within the next sort of 6 to 12 months. And as we can see here, the urgency we have, the very first one should be done as soon as possible. The next few is soon, kind of as soon as we've done point 1, get on to points 2 to 5. And the other ones, again, will need a little bit more sort of preparation, a few other things to go in place before they can happen. So we put them as later, but we still expect they could happen within the next sort of, as I say, 6 to 12 months. Again, this little table just highlights the different sort of elements that are addressing the economy, energy, transport, digital, and of course the community environment. And as you can see that most of them are addressing multiple different things. So again, we're looking for a much more interconnected approach that can really address all 4 of these kind of key goals in a more holistic way. So what is recommendation number 1 then? So first of all, we think what's most important for Anglesey to do and what's most important for it to do first is to develop a quadruple helix or forum, which would connect businesses, residents, the council and local skills providers. So quadruple helix approaches aren't necessarily new, but they're not always used. They're still sort of relatively rare. And this is really important in bringing together these 4 different groups of business, academia, civil society, and the local authority and government. There's various reasons you do this, but the main one is that you're going to ensure that the smart transition is supported by and can support the broader community. So everyone kind of will be on board, will be able to have their say. It also makes it a lot easier to draw on the expertise and knowledge that exists on and around the island and ensure that Anglesey first approach comes in play. It gives opportunities to learn from and share within the community. So not only to share, things that Anglesey might be doing to become more smart, but to learn from the community and understand how it can better meet the community needs. But also quite importantly is this can spread the risk of taking on something like a smart transition across multiple actors. So often we might think that these kind of activities will be taken by someone like the local council, but by developing this quadruple forum, actually you're kind of, again, sort of reducing that risk across multiple sectors and multiple actors. So as we say, we think this should be starting now and continue sort of in the long term. It's very likely that an organisation such as Menter Mon is best placed to have oversight over this. But again, it should be as kind of even and non-hierarchical as possible. And again, we'd recommend this was done by a series of both online and in-person events, ensuring that multiple people, both on and very near the island, can access it. And this should be started as soon as that forum's kind of up and running, is to develop an Anglesey specific database, so kind of just expanding almost what's happened with Patron, to encourage the collection of and analysis of smart data from across the island. So this would effectively look like a database or repository that's Anglesey specific, but also that's not just looking at sort of town centre data, but is a lot broader in its scope. So we're looking at this kind of quite typical smart data, thinking about sort of transport and economic data, but also bringing in the energy use, energy generation, and the other kind of points that we've been discussing today. So the really, really important thing about this is it would provide a very, very useful evidence base to implement future evidence-based changes. It would also support applications to secure funding. So we've noted that there's a kind of a very healthy smart landscape of funding out there. By being able to really evidence exactly what's happening and how, which data can do, and that this will be a real key bonus. Again, though, it will definitely benefit locals, whether that's sort of local businesses who can submit requests for relevant data, residents who can better understand their own sort of energy use. This might be schools and education providers who can use this data set as a teaching tool to engage other people in sort of data science as well. It could also have a commercial element, and that third-party developers would be able to develop products and services based on the data, although we do recommend that it's not necessarily that third-party developers would have to request to do this, and the data is not fully open. And again, this is something that would be very much drawn on local expertise. As Elliot was saying, there is a real clear emerging digital skills sector on the island. And there is definitely sort of existing businesses that would be able to develop and host this database. Again, largely we think the forum, if the forum is set up, would be the sort of ultimate owner of the data, but it could be the case that might have to sit in the council or Menter Mon or a similar organisation. This is one of those things that it might sound like quite a big job, sort of developing a very big database that can hold such a vast variety of data. But actually it's relatively low cost in terms of the financial investment. It is quite high cost in terms of the resources. So there needs to be multiple discussions in a sort of forum setting where you bring in different stakeholders, including people that might be generating data, people that might be sort of using data, and really think exactly about what the database needs to collect. And you need to basically make sure it's quite future-proofed and perhaps collects more than you might need at the moment. But as I say, in the scheme of things, a low cost, it just does involve a lot of sort of communication and discussion to get it started. The third recommendation, and we've called this Smarter Anglesey, a little play on words there, is to improve the digital, energy, economic, knowledge, capacity and skills on the island. So effectively trying to skill up or make Anglesey smarter. So again, this will be focused on the kind of the key themes that have emerged from this research as being important. So this is digital, energy and economic. And also by bringing these three skills together, which, you know, there's already lots being done on and around the island to teach digital skills or to teach kind of more business skills. But by bringing them together, that can help equip residents and businesses with the capability to thrive in a smart island environment where digital, energy, economic, transport are increasingly kind of all rolled into one. It can also sort of encourage an innovation enterprise mindset as well by bringing these together and letting people think about the connections between digital, between energy and between business. And again, we think that this would also be a really, really useful way to explain the importance of things such as the Anglesey database to try and get more people involved in the forum and effectively use this to help implement the other recommendations as well. And perhaps most essentially, this would do a lot to ensure that no one is left behind and that there's a savvy workforce developed for kind of the emerging industries on the island, but also again just to ensure that nobody's going to be excluded from the smart transition. So making sure that people, as we've said, perhaps that are older or who might not speak English as a first language and can struggle more getting online, make sure that those people are not going to be left behind at all. So again, we think this is something that should be starting soon, basically, as I say, after the forum's on its way, and should be continued very much in the long term. This is not a kind of short-term thing. This is something that does need to stay with the Smart Island strategy. But of course, there are some excellent education and skills providers already on and around the island, so Coleg Menai and of course Bangor University, we think would be kind of ideally placed to lead on this. The next one is a bit more specifically focused on energy, and this is making an energy plan for the long term that prioritises mixed use renewable energy generation as that key focus for industrial activity. So again, we've spoke to people in wind, solar, hydrogen, you name it, every different type of energy generation on the island. And what it seems to be is that the best way to really kind of future-proof the economy, to ensure the economy can develop in a more circular way and to really attract a high-skilled and high-wage sector, is to invest in mixed-use generation rather than just focusing on one or two. So while this in itself can cause some logistical challenges, hopefully the database itself will sort of make things easier in the collecting of data and kind of seeing how things move. But again, it can reduce the risks inherent in just investing in one area, for example, hydrogen. We also, however, think this would be really, really important to allow Anglesey to generate a very clear brand identity as being this kind of energy island, which it's already been working on over the past few years. In itself, this can sort of attract further investors and sort of lead to a bit of a roll-on situation. And with a sort of overall aim that Anglesey becomes basically the UK's renewable energy hub and kind of the expert, and whether that's both generation and R&D. So really sort of becoming a UK leader. But again, obviously by bringing some clear industry back to the island, the economic benefits should be passed on to the community. This itself will come from the fact that there's more business, but we can also be thinking about improvements to local services or reductions in council tax by using kind of excess energy immediately on the island as well, which we'll talk a little bit about more later on. Again, we think this should be started soon and continued in the long term. It very much needs the buy-in of all the electricity generators on the island, but again, it does seem that people are quite happy to sort of be working together here. And as we said, it's really about building on what's already happening, this energy island strategy, but with a real clear focus on collaboration into the future. Our recommendation number 5 is focused a little bit more on transport, and this is to really prioritise improving Anglesey's public and active transport systems through using smart technologies. So there's lots of different kind of ways we can use smart technologies when we look at transport and active transport. This can be tracking sort of when buses leave, how often they're on time, the routes they kind of go. It can be tracking the number of people that access transport options such as buses and trains. It can be using footfall data in towns to try and understand if there've been increases or decreases in sort of active travel. There's lots and lots of sort of different ways this can be done. A key one that had been raised lots of times in the stakeholder engagement here was mapping and tracking of buses. So lots of people were telling us we would happily use the bus if we actually knew when it was going to turn up. Sometimes it's 20 minutes late, sometimes it's 10 minutes early. And it wasn't even that people's journeys were that time critical, it's just that you don't want to stand at a bus stop for 30 minutes. So even having buses that can have sort of GPS trackers and give a real-time update to apps that people can then leave the house 5 minutes before the bus is coming, rather than 5 minutes before the bus is planned to come. So it's thinking about quite small change things like this, which can really improve the wider access to public and active transport. This can also sort of bring positive benefits to the natural environment and human health, and again links in with wider commitments and policy pushes in improving active and public transport as well. Plus, it should also contribute to the local economy through job creation and improving productivity as well. So I think this is a really, really important one. Again, this should be started soon and continued in the long term. This really needs the buy-in of both the council and the local bus providers as a kind of starting point. Also, we think sort of employers as the next level who can really encourage people to use public and active transport to get to and from work. And as we say, there's kind of specific technologies you can buy to sort of do the tracking, but it would involve some quite significant resources to develop a public-facing app and to understand how the data can be used to more efficiently plan and transport as well. So it's something that to start off is quite easy, but it does need a bit more sort of attention as it continues. So as I said, these ones we're saying these should start a little bit afterwards. There may need a few more things to happen before these before Anglesey's ready for these. But as we say, we're still thinking it'll be in the next 6 to 12 months. So first of all, an improvement in digital connectivity, particularly in the black spots. There is a real need to focus on places that have the gaps. This is particularly the more remote areas of the island. So town centres tend to be very, very good. And as soon as you move kind of 2 to 3 miles outside of there, there's some real significant black spots. However, given the direction of travel in the UK, we think there should be a very, very specific focus on mobile and 5G connectivity. And effectively, there's not much point in investing in things like 3G that are going to be sort of relatively different quite soon. We do, however, really think there's a potential to expand on the LoRaWAN that's currently being implemented across the island, much of which is down to Menter Mon. And there's also the opportunity to explore satellite Wi-Fi that can be particularly useful for more remote places, and it gets rid of having to sort of build an infrastructure on the ground as well. But by improving digital connectivity, it would have sort of many improvements for people across the island, but particularly for sort of productivity, thinking about work and study, and again, make Anglesey more attractive for external investment. Again, this is something that should be sort of led by the council, but with private providers need to be on board. So we know, for example, that there's places like Vodafone are already working on the island to improve connectivity down the A55 corridor. And again, it's just making sure that everyone's on the same sort of page here, and that there is that real focus on the black spots rather than improving connectivity in places that might already be quite well connected. Number 7, then, we think that there's a real great potential for Anglesey to become an island testbed for digital and renewable energy innovations. Now, this one does definitely need improvements in connectivity and some of this sort of data on the database to be collected in order to effectively be able to test and evidence what's happened from the testing. But effectively, by transforming Anglesey into the go-to place to test innovative digital and renewable energy solutions and technologies, again, this would bring sort of more investment to the islands. It would also sort of provide the opportunity for Anglesey to become a UK, if not really a global leader. So there's not really that many islands in the world trying to position themselves in this way. And given Anglesey's sort of unique geography, there's some real kind of potential there. And again, this can sort of very actively translate into additional to Anglesey being more preferable in funding opportunities in the future, because it would have that kind of clear name. So we think this is something that, as I say, the connectivity needs to improve, and we need a little bit of data collection, but largely it's already sort of happening to a small level, and this is something that can just be done from kind of marketing Anglesey in funding applications and to the right investors. The next one is invest in smart road signage, so another one that's a bit more focused on transport. Again, so smart roads can collect, sorry, that should just be smart roads collect real-time traffic data, and where issues arise, we can then sort of instruct road users via a sign to adapt their journeys. So this could be things such as change in speed, suggesting or forcing use of alternative routes, making roads into one-way systems, whether that's permanently or for certain times of the days. It can even be on a very sort of hyper-local level that there's a warning that there's going to be a bus or refuse collection coming down quite a narrow road, and to either wait 5 minutes or to go a different route. We think this would be particularly important to more evenly distribute the economic benefits of tourism across the island. So Daphne was saying at the very beginning there, in COVID, Anglesey had some real significant sort of issues with congestion in key sort of honey spot sites, as well as on the key entry and exit points of the island. But by using things such as smart road signage, you can effectively, when things do get busy, sort of move people off into different areas. This could also include, for example, suggesting people to go to parts of the island that are less commonly visited by tourists, and again, trying to really distribute those economic benefits of tourism. Again, this should largely be led by the council, but given that not all roads in Anglesey are under sort of the council's purview, would also involve buy-in from Transport for Wales as well. And again, this is something we think should be happening on kind of medium to long term there is a need to collect some more data from the database. And I think a need to first try and prioritise getting people on public transport and sorting out public transport as well. There's not necessarily, if making roads more efficient doesn't necessarily fit in with kind of wider net zero commitments. So I think focusing on active travel is important, but this should definitely be something that can happen in the medium to long term. And again, this is actually sort of quite relatively low cost in the installation phase. So it's just installing monitors and kind of trackers. Again, if there was the database existing, this would really help for the analysis as well. But there does need to be investment into developing an autonomous system. But it could be the case that at the beginning it's sort of half autonomous and that there is still a human typing into what the sign should say. But again, this is something that does seem sort of very, very feasible given the current landscape in Anglesey. So number 9 then, as we said before, there was another energy one. This is the second energy focused one. And this is to develop capability for immediate use of energy on the island. So there is a lot of types of energy generation that actually what we're seeing is energy effectively being lost. Energy is being generated, if it can't be used immediately, it might not be able to go into the national grid. So this can be certain types of hydrogen, for example. Or it could be the case that actually it's just basically becoming exported off the island and no one on the island's getting any benefits. So what we can start thinking of then is as ways to develop an economic strategy, so thinking about the kind of broader work that the council does, to take advantage of the abundant zero carbon energy that can be generated on the island. So in particular here, we can start thinking of green hydrogen and perhaps trying to use that immediately. So this could be converting vehicles to be able to use hydrogen as their fuel source and effectively using hydrogen immediately and sort of refilling stations at the ferry port. This could also, for example, be used to support local authority services. So your gyms, your libraries, schools, things such as that, we could be given almost free or very, very low cost and energy to these key services and organisations, which itself will definitely provide wider community benefits, whether that's by allowing further kind of warm buildings in the community, or whether this comes into sort of lower council taxes and things like that. Again, this kind of ability for immediate energy use would have lots of kind of knock-on effects for the wider community, as well as, of course, the environment. And then finally, the last in our sort of list of very key recommendations that we think should definitely be addressed soon is thinking about the potential to form or either join a UK Smart Island group. So as I said before, there is little bits, sort of pockets of smart island things happen in the UK, although it's largely in the Highlands at the moment. We actually would probably recommend that Anglesey forms one and tries to be sort of a central player there. And we also recognise that there's a real big gap following the UK's withdrawal from the EU. So previously, lots of other islands in the UK that are doing little bits of smart things were in an EU-wide network. They're no longer sort of part of that network since Brexit. And there is a real clear gap for basically a collaborative body that can share experience, can share knowledges, and again, gain increased lobbying power. So we think by sort of Anglesey taking a leading role in sort of trying to become this key player, it can really be, again, a key player in the UK and the global smart landscape. And again, this itself should attract further investment from external investors.
Yeah, so building on this, looking further into the future, we've also considered 5 moonshots, which are some longer term ambitions and opportunities. So these things are not really viable to undertake now, but they can be used to prompt consideration of longer term goals and develop a picture of where Anglesey wants to be in about 10 years' time. So the first one of those is airships for zero emissions passenger transport. So this would facilitate links between South Wales, Ireland, places like Cardiff, Dublin, etc. And basically just develop a new transport medium that is unique market opportunities for the island as well. Second one of these is looking at hydrogen export from offshore to the UK grid. So Anglesey is ideally located for green hydrogen generation. And this could include repurposing things such as the Stanlow oil pipeline as well. The third thing on that list is the smart, responsive and autonomous tourist transport. So this is things like distributing tourist gains and pains across the island, looking at buses, taxis, e-bikes, scooters, and even considering transport links across the Menai Strait with small boats, which feeds directly into developing and investing a new way of accessing the mainland, which is the fourth one on the list there. So this is things like improving resilience with potential for attraction, and then looking at bike, pedestrian, bridge, sea, transport, rail, etc. And developing things, possibly even like a pedestrian-only bridge and things like that. And then the final one on that list is developing an all-island smart electricity grid. So this will be looking at things involving testbed for net zero transition, and the smart and interconnected grid on the island, and then crucially other things that come into that as well, upskilling, community training on renewable energy sources, community ownership of energy projects, and things of that nature as well.
Thank you. So that's largely where we're going to end, but just to note that these moonshots, we're not saying these definitely should be going in, but it's more giving a flavour of what Anglesey can aspire to, if those kind of first 10 recommendations are really taken on board, and that there is a very engaged forum, there is that clear database. When we have sort of the basics there, these more exciting and potentially sort of moonshots ambitions can really come into focus. So I'm just going to leave it there for now and open up the floor for questions. But if anybody there would want to get in touch to myself or Elliot, I've just put our email addresses on the screen there for a moment.
Thank you both. That was really interesting. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, it's Paul from Vodafone. Hi, guys.
Hi, Paul. You okay?
Yeah, thanks for inviting us to this. So, listen, a lot of information, all good stuff, I might say. In the end, I stopped writing because there was that much content in regards to what we could help you with moving forward. And it's our intention to do so. I know that we had the events in Vodafone at the CEC quite recently, and we touched on some of this from a network perspective, connectivity, devices, etc., etc. So I take it you're going to share. Are you able to share that content that's been visible today to us and the meeting? Because what I would like to do is, because I want to get the stakeholders within Vodafone engaged for the new fiscal sort of April onwards, because we're at our year end currently, and I want to speak to the relevant sort of stakeholders, the heads of the likes of networks, the likes of IoT, all the stuff you spoke about, which is integrated within those departments, and I want to get them engaged. So moving forward, we've got a seamless approach, and everyone that needs to be sort of in the conversation is in the conversation from the start. So if we can share the details, that would be fabulous. And I sort of my pen ran out, so I was looking at smart buildings, smart villages, smart towns, smart cities. That's what we do, guys. That's our pedigree. We're right in the quadrant there at year 12. So all the stuff that we've spoken about today, we can absolutely assist, guide, talk about. And also is in regards to, there's a lot of projects there, and I see you've got some sort of formula or sort of modular approach. From a budgetary perspective, is the money going to come from Welsh Gov? Is it coming from independent, dependent on what it is? Will it be transport, yada, yada, yada? How does that look from a budget perspective? Because there's lots of plans, but didn't see much about the money side. So what does that look like?
Sorry, Maddie, I was just going to say, I'll definitely make sure that copies of the report go out. This session will be on YouTube, and we're just waiting for the translation of the report to happen into Welsh, and then they will be distributed. And then I think maybe if we pass to David to answer about the funding.
Well, there's no silver bullet in terms of funding, but in terms of Welsh governments are very committed to the digital agenda, and we're delivering the smart towns across Wales. So there will be funding associated with some of the activities directly with digital and maybe transforming towns. Yeah. If you were to look at the energy sector, obviously that's a completely different sector, but there is funding within that. There are a lot of projects going on now in Anglesey around, as was mentioned, hydrogen, tidal, solar, etc. And there is funding available within that arena that could be repurposed for digital, especially when it comes to smart energy monitoring, etc. And again, if you look at transport, you know, there is, if we can justify the value for money in terms of introducing digital in the transport, then funding would be available potentially through that. So there isn't one pot to make all this happen, but it's a case of making the case within each of these various sectors.
Yeah, okay. It's about, so obviously if you're prioritising certain projects, I guess the money is going to be there sooner rather than later, hence why they've been prioritised. What we would call from couch to destination journey, again, that's our cloud security analytics IoT team, that we've done all this with the likes of Network Rail, you know, from which you mentioned the app, for instance, you know, getting to the bus stop and standing there for an hour is not ideal. But it's the same with trains, you know, and same with planes. You know, we've even gone to the strength of augmented reality, where we get to the train station, it directs you to the correct platform, takes you to the correct train, even takes you for a coffee if it's going to be late for 20 minutes, and we've got a discount on the cost of coffee for 25%. You know, so we can really drill down in that sort of stuff. So thanks for answering the question around the budgets. And I think that you mentioned obviously LoRaWAN was in there, all the capabilities around LoRaWAN. We know LoRaWAN's big in Welsh Government. It's what they've been driving and pushing. However, I will say this again, we mentioned the CEC, and it was one topic that stuck in people's minds, was the network that's available to you guys in Wales is narrowband IoT. Now, that in itself is a great connectivity network for you to sort of to subsidise or inherently use over and above the likes of LoRaWAN, because LoRaWAN does need certain connectivity, certain power, yada yada yada, to actually get the data from. So again, we probably need to be opening that conversation about what's available in your black spots, what we would call, we'd have network there, you know, we'll have a cell site, we'll have a narrowband cell site there. So from a carbon perspective, it ticks all the boxes there. And there's always a concern around when people mention data capture. For us, and it's just for been Vodafone 8 years now, we've got a lot of councils out there that have got a lot of stuff, a lot of IoT from different places for different things, and they're collecting the data, but it's what we do with that data, as you pointed out, that's important. So how we analyze the data and what we do with that. Again, we've got platforms, single pane of glass, where if you were to connect, let's say, certain projects through Vodafone, it'd be one entry point to that data. And also there's algorithms in that we've built in to almost automate, which you mentioned about automation of data rather than being a manual approach. Again, that's something that's very feasible with Vodafone through a product called IoT NXT, and that's a single pane of glass. So they were just my notes, guys, but there's lots more in that presentation that I feel like I need to sit down with my stakeholders for a full day and then drill into that, and then look at how first, you know, where it's going to go, who needs to be involved from your side, not just ours, and then almost build a roadmap from an action perspective and prioritize that against how you want this to look. So there's a bit of work to be done, but more than happy to pick this up. So
thanks, Paul. That sounds great.
No worries. That's me done, by the way.
Thanks, Paul.
You. Any other questions? Ali?
Lovely, diolch yn fawr iawn pawb, thank you everyone. It's been my first time really receiving this information as the very interested resident of the island, but who actually works off the island. So I think looking for opportunities to engage more with really exciting future. So I'm really pleased to be here. So thank you so much for sharing. I had a question. I see a connection with age-friendly communities, but Wales is woefully lacking the move behind. It's a little bit behind in that movement, and I think even Cardiff only really came on board within the last 6 or 8 months. But some of the commitments for age-friendly communities, and given the ageing population of the island, it seems to me like it's quite a companion kind of framework to what's happening. So I just wondered if that's been considered anywhere, or if there's any companion pieces of work being done with the Smart Island approach. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr.
Thanks for that, Ali. Yeah, thanks for the kind words. Yeah, so we, as we sort of said, the aging population is one of the key challenges that it faces, and lots of what we were saying that, you know, there is a need to skill up residents and things like that is again setting that landscapes to allow digital technologies, for example, to come in older people's homes to help with the care of older people as well. Daphne, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I feel like you said you were speaking to a care board or something as well, weren't you?
Well, there have been discussions for many years in terms of the care sector, and introducing IoT technology and sensor technology to allow people to remain in the homes longer. From where I stand, the technology seems to be there. The challenge is the adoption, really, because obviously there are understandable sensitivities around monitoring people. So I think that needs to be addressed. And there are organisations, you know, I know ADRA are looking into this. I know Cronfa Council are looking into this as well. So there are advantages to using this technology in the care sector. But like a lot of this, whether it's smart towns or agriculture or social care, it's not a technology issue. It's more of an adoption issue and an understanding and implementation issue, really. And that's something organisations such as ourselves need to facilitate, really, to get over those barriers. But there are advantages to using this technology in that sector.
And we do think as well that some of the recommendations we've said, and yeah, bringing people together and trying to get them on the same page, giving people training and improving things such as kind of black spots that actually does make some monitoring technologies kind of unviable. So if these are dealt with, then it leaves that landscape open to maybe make the implementation a bit more easier, or to have people adopt it in a bit less of a difficult way. So yeah, again, it's kind of setting up that landscape to allow some of these more moonshot ambitions to happen in the future as well.
Thank you. Paul, did you have something to add there?
Sorry, here again. So just, Ali, that's a great point you've just raised there. So again, happy to facilitate the conversations through yourself, Menter Mon and Urban, is that we're very, very upskilled and in front of the social value digital inclusion piece, because it's not just about the connectivity, it's also the adoption, like David mentioned there, but it's also the cost element as well. So we do a lot of social value tariffs, heavily reduced, sometimes free kit. This is about the end user. So we might put all this good stuff in, but we need people to utilize it. And to do that, there's sometimes a cost involved. So again, that's an approach that can be taken or can be looked at from our side once the project's up and running, what that might look like. And again, what we can do as an organisation, because I think we connected 1 million people, we're now stretched that to 3 million. So this is free connectivity across our network from a data perspective, whatever it looks like. But we have a social value team of which I can get engaged into these projects, and we can discuss further. So, and that might help. And to Ali's point.
Thanks, Paul.
No problem.
Lon, did you have a question?
Oh, yeah, sorry, mine's just a bit of an addition really to what Ali was asking as well. So I work for Digital Communities Wales, which is the Welsh Government Digital Inclusion Programme, and I am responsible for Anglesey. And one of the projects that we've been supporting over the last 2 years is the Virtual Hubs project on Anglesey, which is something where they are turning community venues into virtual venues as well, so people can access them online and attend events and anything like that online. That was a project in partnership with Age Cymru Ynys Môn. So I know they were looking more at the older population and how to develop their skills using digital technologies. Other aspects of our work, though, you were mentioning some of the smart devices for homes. We have been working quite a bit with care homes, for instance, and in some other areas in Wales, we've been working with occupational therapists on how they can utilise those technologies within their patients' homes. So even if it is a reminder to take your medication or those practical ideas, really, and there is a lot of well-being outcomes from them as well, from people who are physically unable to turn on the TV and being sat in a home alone in the quiet, able to actually turn on the TV or turn on the radio, or those sort of simple things, really, but they are making a big difference. So there are a lot of these options available as well that could be included in any sort of older people support or things in the community. But we've already got a digital inclusion partnership network, I'll call it, already active, and we meet about once a quarter. So if I know, Kiki, you've been to some of them. I know if you wanted a little spot on the agenda to discuss this with some of the organisations already doing digital inclusion in the communities across the island, I think it would be a good point to have that discussion with them as well.
That would be great. Thank you. Definitely.
Thanks, Bella.
I'm a bit mindful of time. I know we're in the last minute or so. Does anyone have any final comments or questions? Great. Well, thank you all. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thanks for joining us. And thanks again, Maddie and Elliot. Really interesting, and really looking forward to taking all these conversations forward in the future.
Thank you, Kiki, and again, thank you. Obviously, there's definitely people that we've spoken to for this project as well. So yeah, just.